My husband and I got married half a year ago, and while the rest of his family seems to like me, my mother in law is always picking on me. She's always commenting on something or the other and telling me to fix myself so that I look better. Earlier, it used to be my hair because I had a pixie cut and she wanted me to look more ladylike, so she would keep suggesting that I grow out my hair, which I did. But now it's my clothes that she has an issue with, and every time we meet, she tells me that I'm dressed too shabbily. It's pretty ridiculous since I literally work in the fashion industry myself and have been complimented on my style by many designers and models. So I know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with the way I dress, that's for sure. For the past 3 months or so, my mother in law had made it a point to comment on the way I was dressed and kept telling me that my outfits were just never good enough to appear in public, and I should know that since I work in fashion myself. While my husband wanted me to just ignore it, I couldn't do that because after a while, it just started getting under my skin. My mother in law has always fancied herself a fashionista, even though her taste in clothes and accessories is pretty mainstream and average. Yeah, she finds it appropriate to comment on my style. Anyway, a few days ago, I just got sick of it after she dropped by and started making fun of me for the way I dressed at home as well. She said that she finds no difference in how I dress at home and how I dress to go out, and by now, I should just take her word for it and buy a whole new wardrobe to make up for my obnoxious clothes. And while I managed to keep my cool then, that comment really pissed me off. I know she intended to get under my skin, and she succeeded. So I did what any reasonable person would do and decided to pull a prank on her. I'd had enough of her jibes and unnecessary remarks by then, so I decided to dress up exactly the way she does. My sister in law was throwing her son a birthday party, and I decided to show up dressed exactly like my mother in law there. I convinced my sister in law to find out what she'd be wearing and inform me, so she was in on the prank, and she even thought that it'd be pretty hilarious to watch. And so did I, very honestly. So 2 days ago, I showed up to the party wearing the exact same pastel green dress and kitten heels that my mother in law was wearing. Before leaving, my husband had laughed for around 15 minutes when he saw me wearing that dress and even said that it looked like something his mother would wear. I filled him in on my idea, and while he did think it was pretty funny, he also warned me that his mother could react badly as well. But I didn't care, since she'd bugged me enough. As soon as my mother in law saw me at the party, I could see that she was dumbstruck. The other members of our family were also trying to hold back their laughter since everyone had heard her commenting on the way I dress at the past few family gatherings, so this seemed to be a befitting reply. I even asked my mother in law after a few seconds of silence if she approved of my clothes now, and guess that got to her. She went all red in the face and started yelling at me about how I was being disrespectful and this was no way to treat someone as senior as her. I could barely get a word in to defend myself. She was yelling at me that loudly. At one point, she called me a mean, narcissistic bully, which was just not true. And that's when I felt really hurt. I was being totally humiliated for a silly prank, even though it was nothing in comparison to how she'd been mocking me for my clothes all these past months. So I started crying, and that's when my husband intervened, saying that he'd had enough. Everyone else at the party was also just standing around us in stunned silence, since nobody had expected my mother in law to react this badly either. My husband told his mother that he wasn't just going to stand around and let her bully me and humiliate me in front of their entire family, and proceeded to leave with me. As soon as we got in the car, I knew that something was going to happen, and I couldn't just go back to being civil to my mother in law unless she decided to apologize for how she treated me. I told my husband that I didn't want her to visit anymore, and I simply didn't want to be around her anymore. She needed to apologize to me sincerely and respectfully. And only then would I even consider speaking to her ever again. He was understanding and even told me that he was on the same page so we could cut his mother off if she didn't apologize, since he was extremely unhappy with whatever she'd said to me. This was 2 days ago, and my husband has communicated our decisions to his mother, and now the ball is in her court. If she apologizes and attempts to be a more decent person, then I might consider forgiving her, and if she doesn't, then, well, we'll be left with no other option but to cut her out of our lives. She didn't say anything to my husband, but texted me instead, saying that I couldn't blame her for how she reacted since what I did was mean and disrespectful. Moreover, her criticism was all just to make sure I didn't make a fool out of myself by dressing badly, but I couldn't take it well and decided to do something totally immature and stupid. So I shouldn't be surprised that she reacted badly. I don't think my prank was out of line, very frankly, since I dress well, and she's the only person who seems to have an issue with what I wear. Now, AITA for pulling a prank on my mother-in-law after she kept telling me to dress better? Update 1. I'm not apologizing to my mother-in-law for whatever happened. I know what I did and I have no regrets about it, so I'm not going to pretend to be sorry either. And as a matter of fact, the rest of my husband's family even reached out to me to let me know that my mother-in-law was the one who was totally out of line. So I had no need to feel embarrassed or humiliated. That was really kind of them and just convinced me even more that what happened was my mother-in-law's fault and not mine. She's the one who doesn't like me, and she's the one who was targeting me first, so she deserved this. She's been trying to convince my husband that I should be the one apologizing to her, but he's not having it, and has made it very clear to her that unless she apologizes to me, neither of us is going to be speaking to her. Of course, that hasn't stopped her from trying to guilt trip me into saying that I'm sorry, though. 3 days have passed since the incident, and she's been texting me every single day to remind me that she's older than me and I should respect her. Not only has she been playing the victim card, but she's also been trying to manipulate me emotionally. She's been telling me that the only reason she would even comment on my hair and clothes was that I'd fix myself and look on par with the rest of the family, since she didn't want me to show up at fancy events looking like a hobo. I already know for a fact that none of that is true, and the only reason she'd pick on me was to put me down and make fun of me, so the emotional manipulation didn't work in her favor at all. In fact, it made me feel a lot more annoyed that she thought I was dumb enough to fall for her tactics. I showed my husband those texts and told him that she needed to either apologize or stop altogether, and he agreed. And since deep down I knew that she wasn't going to apologize to me, I decided to block her everywhere. Now, if she has something to say, then she'll simply have to speak to my husband. Update 2. Yesterday, I blocked my mother-in-law after she tried to emotionally manipulate me into apologizing. Today, she showed up at my house as if it was a totally normal thing to do. I took a day off today and decided to stay home by myself since my husband still had to go to work. It was all going well until around 4 in the afternoon when the doorbell started ringing incessantly, and I opened it to find my mother-in-law standing there. As soon as I opened the door, she let herself in and sat down on the couch, demanding that I make some strong black coffee. I was a little taken aback, and it took me a few seconds to compose myself before I said anything. I told her that I wasn't going to make her anything since she wasn't welcome in my house anymore, and that if she wasn't here to apologize, then she needed to leave. She scoffed and said that this house belonged to her son and she could do whatever she wanted to. And then she ordered me to make her some coffee yet again. That really annoyed me, and I told her that I was not going to let her push me around anymore, and that if she wanted coffee so badly, then she could get up and make it for herself. She tried to argue with me, but I put my headphones on and left the room. I locked myself in my study for the next half an hour and only got up to check what was happening outside when I heard someone knocking on the door of my study. My husband had come home by then and was surprised to find his mother in the living room drinking coffee all by herself. He told me that the second he'd walked in, she'd pounced on him and started to tell him about how I had been incredibly rude to her and that he needed to teach me how to behave. He'd guessed that I'd be in my study, so he told his mother to wait in the living room while he spoke to me about what had happened. So I explained how she dropped by in the afternoon and had basically treated me like I was her assistant or something in my own house. She'd been the one who had disrespected me once again, and this time under my own roof. I even told him that I'd politely asked her to leave, but she refused to do so, saying that since this was her son's house, she could do whatever she wanted to. I mean, we'd gone 50-50 for the house, but whatever floats her boat. My husband was already quite exhausted from work, and when I told him all that had happened, he got even more annoyed. He went back to the living room and told me to stay in the study since he didn't want his mother to say anything else to me anymore. I wasn't in the room, but soon they were fighting loud enough for me to hear everything that was being said. My husband told his mother to leave, and he didn't want to speak to her unless she realized her mistake and apologized to me sincerely. But my mother-in-law obviously wasn't going to do that. She called my husband an ungrateful brat and said that he was in over his head for supporting me when I'd made it abundantly clear in front of everyone that I didn't respect her and had even tried to make a mockery out of the way she dresses. They yelled at each other for about 15 minutes, but then finally my husband gave up and told her that she needed to leave or else he'd have to force her out or report her to the cops. That did seem to irk his mother, and she used a few choice curse words for me, which I'm not going to repeat here, but they were really hurtful. After that, she finally left, and that's when I left my study to go check on my husband. He's not much for confrontation, so I knew that this had been hard on him, and I felt terrible about it. But I was also quite happy about the fact that he'd stood up for me and fought his mother all for my sake. So right now, I'm getting him takeout from his favorite restaurant and red wine to go with it for a nice cozy dinner. God knows he needs it after such a stressful day. I'm hoping that this will be the end of it and we won't have to deal with his crazy mom anymore because today was really just so stressful for the both of us. And I'm not sure we can handle that. He hasn't blocked his mother yet, which I understand and respect, since if something bad were to happen to her, he'd still want to know and be there for her. So I'm not going to pressure him into doing anything rash, but I've also made my own boundaries clear and let him know that I am not going to be interacting with his mother anymore. Today was the last nail in the coffin, quite honestly, and I'm not willing to put up with any more disrespect just to maintain the peace of the family. He agrees with that too and has told me that while he'll be there for her in emergencies, he's also still going to make it clear to her that she cannot drop by unannounced anymore and that he's not going to visit her either for some time unless she has a change of heart and apologizes to me. My husband has put it all in a text and told her that she's not welcome here anymore if she's going to be disrespectful and that that's his final decision. Now that all that's done with, my husband and I just want to forget about all this for a while and enjoy our night in. Update 3. It didn't end there like I'd hoped it would. 2 days ago, my husband got into a massive argument with his mother regarding her disrespectful behavior towards me, and I'd thought that she'd have learned her lesson by then. Clearly, she didn't, since today she somehow managed to find her way back into my life yet again. While I was at work today, my phone started buzzing with notifications all of a sudden, and when I checked my messages, all of them were from my friends and relatives telling me to check Facebook as soon as I could. So I did so and found that someone had hacked into my account and posted a bunch of crap about how I was an awful person who was trying to ruin my husband's life and how I had no respect or regard for my seniors. I knew for a fact that this was my mother-in-law's work, and I couldn't believe that she'd actually gotten someone to hack my account just to post such awful things about me and malign my image. Some of my coworkers had also seen those posts and alerted me to take them down before they got to HR. But by then, it was too late. I was summoned, and honestly, I count myself lucky that I have a good relationship with my boss and HR manager since they were really kind about the situation and just warned me to take extra security measures regarding my social media accounts, since in this day and age, our online presence is really important. They even told me that I could go back home early today because I looked really stressed out and upset about this, and I took them up on the offer quite readily. As someone who works in fashion, my reputation and image mean a lot to me, and I could lose a lot of work if I'd allowed those posts to stay up even longer. I've contacted some of my more tech savvy friends to help me secure my account and to track down who was responsible for this. Until that's all done, I've just changed my password and added more layers of protection to my account so that nobody can hack into it that easily anymore. I can't believe that my mother in law would do such a thing. I mean, our enmity aside, this was just low and disgusting. She had no right to do something that would pose a risk to my career, and this will definitely have terrible repercussions for her. I'm definitely going to make sure of that. Right now, I'm just waiting for my husband to get home so that I can tell him about what happened because he doesn't check his phone when he's at work that often. After discussing this with him, I'm going to take my next step, and it sure as hell won't be good for my mother-in-law. Update 4. I told my husband what happened, and he's furious, even more than I was, truth be told. He wanted to take legal action against her right away, but I couldn't risk getting my name dragged so publicly so soon again, so I suggested that we try to speak to her and try to sort things out in a civilized manner before going ahead and doing anything rash. Once my husband had calmed down, he understood my point and agreed to it, and we decided to invite her over the next day so that we could talk to her and get to the bottom of this behavior. Quite honestly, I was just drained from all this drama and wanted it to be over. My mother-in-law had always hated me, and I dealt with it in my own way by ignoring it earlier, but this was getting out of hand, and I couldn't risk this affecting my job, which is why I chose to deal with things diplomatically now as opposed to my earlier approach. I knew now that she was willing to do anything to get back at me just because her son sided with me over her. So this was the best way forward for me. The next day, she came over, and it was quite awkward since we all knew what had happened, but we had to tiptoe around it for a while before we could get to the point. Anyway, we did eventually get to talking about what she'd done, and while I'd expected her to admit that she was the one who was responsible for hacking into my account and posting all that crap, she started denying it vehemently, since that's absolutely not okay. And if she refused to do that, then she'd leave us with no choice but to take legal action against her. And that's something none of us want. But here, she wasn't even willing to admit to what she did, and we were just at our wits' end. What should have been a civilized discussion turned into another heated argument among us once again. I knew for a fact that this was her doing, and I told her that I wasn't buying any of her lies, but she began telling me that whatever was posted was actually true, and she was glad that my account had been hacked. My husband even explained to her that she could just act like a decent human being, admit to what she did, and just apologize. But she was hell-bent and refused to do anything of the sort. She said that she wasn't sorry for anything and that we could do whatever we wanted to, but she wasn't going to pretend to be apologetic for anything at all. And then my husband and I knew that there was no point in arguing with her anymore, so we decided to leave it at that and ask her to go back home and that she'd be hearing from our lawyers soon. She merely laughed in my face and left. I guess she thinks we're just bluffing, but I'm already speaking to people to find a good family lawyer because I'm just absolutely done with this crap now. My husband has a friend who works as an ethical hacker and has reached out to him so that we can prove that his mother was responsible for all those defamatory posts. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm definitely going through with this and filing for a restraining order against her. I've had enough. Update 5. Phew, so it's been a few weeks since the last update, and I'm so happy to inform you guys that we successfully managed to get a restraining order against my mother-in-law. There was a whole lot of drama that ensued once she served, and she tried to play the victim card again, but all our relatives were well aware of her antics and how she'd been harassing me and my husband over the past few weeks, so nobody really had any sympathy for her. Plus, we were even able to prove that she was the one who had hacked into my account. Well, technically, not exactly her, since she managed to convince a friend of hers, whose son was quite adept at hacking, to do so for him, but the woman didn't have enough brains to not do it from her personal computer, so it was pretty easy to trace the post back to her. She posted constantly about how she was being wronged by me and that I was the villain in this situation for trying to ruin her relationship with her son, but nobody was supporting her apart from a few of her friends. The rest of the family had made it pretty clear that they were on our side and had cut her off as well. As a last ditch attempt, she even texted me from a different number one day before the hearing, saying that I was being incredibly cruel by making her only son cut her out of his life and that I should rethink my decision. I really wish I felt even a little sorry for her, but after everything that she put me through, it's just really difficult to feel bad for someone like that. So I told her that respect was a two-way street, and since she'd never respected me or felt sorry about hurting me time and again, I didn't feel sorry in the least about doing this to her either. And I blocked that number as well. That was almost 1.5 weeks ago, and then the restraining order was finalized, so now she can't contact us ever again. I'm finally relieved now that I know she won't be able to get to me again, and so is my husband. We're done and dusted with this episode, and I'm hoping that I can go back to leading a drama-free and peaceful life again. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.